Tonight, thankfully, all calm on the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, where protesters have taken to those streets for the past 2 weeks. And they've been doing it demanding justice in the shooting death of 18-year-old Michael Brown. Well, this evening, we're learning more about the grand jury preparing to weigh in on that case. And we also come closer to home to Staten Island, where thousands are preparing to march alongside Reverend Al Sharpton in the protest of the police-related deaths of Michael Brown and James Garner. We'll be there live this weekend, and tonight we'll have a preview. Plus, this evening, we take a closer look at the Brown case out of Missouri, as well as the Garner case in Staten Island, and we hear from the New York Public Advocate Letitia James, members of Eric Garner's family, PBA President Pat Lynch, and retired homicide investigator, also giving us a look at the cases from a police officer's point of view. We'll also hear from the former Assistant Staten Island DA Jason Leventhal, who's got a lot to say on the subject. Good evening and welcome to RFL, everyone. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us. And tonight we do start in Ferguson, Missouri, where we are learning much more about the grand jury, their makeup, and where the case goes from here in the death of 18-year-old Michael Brown. Police consolidating their command posts, but not scaling back patrols despite another peaceful night of protests on the streets of Ferguson.
I think that is a tangible sign of solid progress, and we want folks to continue to help us working together.
Tomorrow marking 2 weeks since Michael Brown was killed by Officer Darren Wilson. The shooting just days after the teen's high school graduation, sparking day after day,
don't shoot, hands up,
night after night
we want justice,
of demonstrations. Protesters promising they'll continue until charges are filed.
No, it's not going to stop. We got to keep going. We got to keep going.
A source close to the investigation says that Officer Wilson's face was beaten, his eye left swollen in a struggle with Brown. Witnesses maintain there was no fight and that the unarmed teen was surrendering when he was killed. All of this being reviewed by a grand jury. We learned today that it's made up of 9 white and 3 black members. As officers say, they are doing all they can to be sure the calm here continues. Now, a court spokesman says that he believes the makeup of the grand jury fairly represents the St. Louis County population. Now, we expect to learn more about them on Monday, the same day as Michael Brown's funeral will be held. Reverend Sharpton, he was expected to deliver the eulogy there. And speaking of Reverend Sharpton, he's also preparing to launch a massive protest on Staten Island tomorrow, on Saturday, to demand justice for Michael Brown as well as Eric Garner. He, of course, the man on your screen, the 43-year-old who died after being put into an apparent chokehold by an NYPD officer. The city medical examiner ruled Garner's death a homicide, and the Staten Island DA Dan Donovan says a grand jury will investigate whether charges should be filed against the officer. Now, I want to bring in political journalist Dominic Carter, who's been covering the story, particularly in Staten Island, since the very beginning. And we do know tomorrow it's going to be significant. Kind of it's fallen out of the headlines a little bit, given in Missouri, but that's going to change again on Saturday.
Oh, in a big way, Richard. Good point. The protesters want criminal charges against the NYPD officers involved. And tonight we get the very latest on tomorrow's march from reporter Miles Miller.
The no parking signs are already in place as Staten Island prepares for a massive rally against police brutality in memory of Eric Garner. The 43-year-old father died last month after being put in an apparent illegal chokehold by an NYPD officer. He had been selling untaxed loose cigarettes outside this bodega on Bay Street.
He put the chokehold. He should be accountable for the guy's death.
Instead of walking across the Verrazano Bridge, 15,000 protesters will be bussed across the bridge in a so-called Justice Caravan. Others are coming to Staten Island from New Jersey. The march will begin at the spot where Garner died, and then they will walk past the Staten Island District Attorney's office. The rally ends here at the 120 precinct, the very precinct where the officer who put Eric Garner in the apparent chokehold is stationed.
We'll be passing every institution of significance in this community to say that justice has to be the order of the day for Eric Garner, but not just for Eric Garner, for all of our communities moving forward.
Stefano Menino owns Bagel Mercado along the demonstration route, and he says he'll have to close his doors because business will be slow.
It's disruptive to my life, and my employees are losing a day's work. I'm losing a day's business.
The Staten Island Chamber of Commerce sent a letter to merchants saying, quote, although the march is considered peaceful, there is no guarantee that everyone in attendance will act sensibly, end quote. Chamber President Linda Barron explains.
Close their business. We're not telling people to close their business. We're really just making them aware so that they can take whatever precautions or however they want to prepare themselves. You know, if they choose to close, that's their own prerogative.
And while police are planning to have a visible presence, protesters say they'll be peaceful.
And we believe that Eric Garner's name and his life should not be in vain. And it won't be in vain if we stand up peacefully, as the family has called to do.
The Reverend Al Sharpton will lead the march, with New York City Council Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito and former Governor David Patterson taking part as well. In Tompkinsville on Staten Island, Miles Miller, Richard French Live.
And of course, be sure to tune in to FiOS 1 News tomorrow for complete coverage of the march on Staten Island starting at 7 a.m. And of course, Richard, we'll have a full team out there. I will be out there tomorrow. We will be observing what's going on. Now, I should point out that I have in front of me right now the media advisory. And obviously, if you're in Staten Island tomorrow, you don't want to be in that area in terms of driving, because the police that will be there very early, they are shutting down, Richard, several blocks in the vicinity. For example, anywhere near Richmond Terrace, Bay Street, Victory Boulevard. I know Victory Boulevard is long, but around this area, downtown Bay Street, you definitely want to stay away from there tomorrow.
There's going to be, as I understand it, Reverend Sharpton's not only going to be speaking down there, but he's also going to be doing his radio program. That there's going to be a march going to the DA's office. Figure anywhere from mid-morning here till maybe early afternoon, 3 o'clock. These things never run on schedule here, but it's going to happen. It's interesting. Originally, it was going to be a march right down the Verrazzano Bridge. I'll give you credit. You said that was never going to happen here. It couldn't work for a lot of reasons, safety and otherwise. It's not. But in a lot of ways, Dominic, somehow what happened in Ferguson overshadowed, at least in recent weeks, what's happened in Staten Island. Do you think that the protest tomorrow is going to be about both and about, that, or do you think it's going to bring it back to about the Garner family and what happened here?
Well, obviously, right now, the national focus is on the case Michael Brown in Missouri. Reverend Sharpton, being the master of media that he is, he's bringing some members of the Brown family for the event with him tomorrow. Now, Reverend Sharpton has said it's going to be a peaceful march. He has done this many times before where it's been peaceful. We're all hoping that it's peaceful. There are going to be a lot of people out there coming, Richard, not just from this area, but from around the tri-state area. They have buses coming, for example, and it's all in the release, from New Jersey, where they're going to meet at one spot in Jersey and then make their way. So to answer your question, the focus is definitely going to come back to the situation with Eric Garner, especially as this heats up. But it's rather ironic because both cases are basically going to the grand juries respectively at the same time.
Well, what both cases have in common is the question about appropriate use of force. And on a much broader level, the questions of what is justice, what is treatment in the justice system and the relationship with the police, especially when we're talking about communities of color. And is there an equal treatment here? And in both cases, in Missouri, it was an unarmed teen. Certainly debate about the facts surrounding what precipitated the shooting, but still, nobody debates. He was an unarmed teen getting ready to go to his first week of college as a freshman. In Staten Island, as we know, the case where there was 5 cops surrounding him, he was accused of selling loose cigarettes, again, unarmed in this particular case, and nobody said he made a move towards the police. So again, it's brought up a national dialogue, and tonight we've got a lot of really interesting people to speak on this subject here. You're going to hear from the PBA president, Pat Lynch here, who's been the most vocal supporter of the officers in question, particularly the officer that was accused of that chokehold that at least the medical examiner has called a homicide. He'll speak to us. And also the former assistant Staten Island DA, Jason Leventhal. And this is a person who has worked for the prosecutor's office in Staten Island and also has brought cases and won cases against members of the Staten Island Police Department, including the officer in question with this. We'll hear from the Eric Garner family. We'll also hear from a retired detective about those complicated relationship between these communities and the police. All that is coming up. But up next, though, we hear from the New York City public advocate Letitia James. She will tell us about her push for police body cameras after the break. Stay with us.